Good morning. Happy Sunday. I am back with another nutrition lesson. I'm glowing. I don't know why it's so bright, but here we are. Today's lesson is going to help you navigate personalizing your training and your nutrition to your needs so that you feel your best. This is like key. So, as a coach, I get asked a lot of questions based on individual circumstances. So, for instance, this morning, I just so happened to wake up to a DM from a athlete who was like, "Hey, I'm not progressing in my training the way that I want to be progressing. I'm eating at maintenance. I'm always hungry. Everything feels hard. And I just like don't feel the way that you describe people should feel." Um, Valid question, right? I actually get asked this often. So we are going to break this scenario down today, why this is happening, because I do hear it so often. So hopefully it's helpful. I'm going to discuss something called biofeedback. You might have heard this phrase be thrown around on the internet. It's one of those things where you're like, but what does it mean? So I'm going to tell you exactly what it means today. And how you can apply it to your life, just to optimize your training and your nutrition, how you feel, so that you can feel your best and perform your best. So this lesson is appropriate for all backgrounds, all goals. And just really quickly, we've had a few requests for captions on these videos, and I'm working hard on making that happen. Facebook doesn't make it easy like everything else. So I'm going to try two different things. Both of them include YouTube, but I'll keep you updated. We're gonna try one today and see if it works. So if that was you, I will just add a comment at the end of this session and kind of keep you filled in. It's gonna be a little bit after the session because I have to like download it and all of this stuff. So we're gonna try hard to get captions because they are important. So today's lesson, let's jump right into things. Oops, so biofeedback. What the heck does that mean? It sounds like, I don't know, one of those phrases where you're just like, what does it mean? People always talk about it. So biofeedback essentially is just like the signals that your body gives you to tell you what it needs. You're like, well, that doesn't sound all too complicated, but this is something that I spend a lot of time working with my one-on-one clients on, teaching them how to, one, identify these signals and how to listen to them and apply them so that their body actually gets what they need. Because what their body needs might not be what they specifically have their focus on at any given moment. So, why is biofeedback so important? Like I said, people tend to focus on end goals, right? So, they're focused on losing body fat, or they're focused on hip thrust PR. And so they really have their eyes set on the game plan and the end goal. And sometimes what happens is they like overlook the signals that their body gives them while they are executing said game plan. So if you ignore the signals that your body gives you, some, most of the time, almost all of the time, these signals are kind of cues that your body's hinting at, and they can help you adjust the game plan to optimize both your experience and your achievements. So sometimes when people ignore their biofeedback, when they are going after PRs or when they're going after certain body composition goals, they actually get completely derailed. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So, I like to explain biofeedback like the dashboard on your car, right? So if you get into your car, you put your keys in the ignition, it has like all of the lights and everything that tell you what's going on with your vehicle. So imagine like you get into your car, you put the keys into the ignition, you drive to wherever you have to go, your destination, but not having a dashboard to tell you what's going on with your car. So it's a complete guessing game. You don't know if you have to get your oil changed, you don't know if you have gas in your vehicle, you don't know anything, right? Maybe you need fluids or whatever. So if you were to break down, you don't know why. The whole engine could be out, or you could just need some gas, right? So the dashboard is incredibly important, and the same applies for biofeedback. If you don't listen to your biofeedback, it's the equivalent of just not having a dashboard in your car or not listening to it, having all of the lights come on, and they're like, hey, you need to get your oil changed. Hey, you need to put air in your tires. Hey, and you're just like, whatever, those are just lights. They don't mean anything. So I am going to talk about 6 factors that are like biofeedback related. There's a lot more than this, but these are the main ones. And if you focus on these, you get like 99% of biofeedback accounted for. So we're going to start with sleep. I have a whole lesson on sleep. So if you're interested in hearing more about it, just look up my lesson, because I have like an hour of why it's important and how it influences how we feel and our decision making and our training, performance, body composition, the whole 9. So make sure you check that out too. So actually it was last week that I did it. So the main points that we want to consider when we are sleeping are, you really want to pay attention to your alertness, right? So do you get tired when you're supposed to get tired? Are you getting tired in the evenings when it's time for bed, or do you feel like wired at that time? Do you feel awake when you wake up in the morning? Or do you feel like you're just kind of dragging, or that's when you are most tired? How is your quality of sleep? Do you stay asleep when you do fall asleep? Do you go to sleep deeply? Are you easily woken up? Some of these are going to be more just individual. It just so happens to be like you're a little bit more of a lighter sleeper than someone else, but you want to look at overriding trends that are impacting your quality of life. So you also want to pay attention to how much you're sleeping on average. I ask my clients, my one-on-one clients this, even my macros clients this, how much they are sleeping like every day. I want to see the average, because there are a lot of things that happen when people get less than 7 hours of sleep. And once I get to know a client, I also get to know their optimal range. So if they seem to be having a hard time, or they are not progressing in their training, or whatever it is, maybe their decision making kind of starts to take a turn, I will look at their sleep, and if it's outside of their optimal range, that's one of the first things that we focus on, because it can have a huge impact, and all you have to do is close your eyes. So a really easy recovery tool and biofeedback fix. Do you make any changes to your routine when you get less than adequate sleep? So say for instance, it's not realistic for you to get less sleep than, or to get more sleep than 7 hours. Maybe you have a big project that you're working on for school or work. Maybe you have an infant at home. Maybe you're taking care of a sick loved one and you are up. Are you making adjustments to your schedule the next day? Are you taking things off your to-do list that can wait? Are you skipping training? Are you modifying training? Are you kind of looking at the overall levels of stress and trying to keep them as balanced as possible while fine-tuning all of the factors that you can? Most of the time, people don't. And when you do get less than adequate sleep, are you familiar with some of the symptoms that pop up for you? Because there are general like guidelines for this, and I talk about them in the sleep lesson that I did last week, but for each person it's going to be a little bit different, and there's going to be like more prominent symptoms for some people than others. So for me, when I get less sleep, I am very cranky and I can fall into a lot more negative self-talk just very easily. I don't have the same reaction that a lot of people have, where they want to grab like more highly palatable foods, or they make more impulsive choices. I don't experience that. Mine is more mood driven. So you just want to like pay attention to your own personal symptoms that pop up. So that is sleep, and something that you should be tracking on a daily basis. So a good way to do that is to again, I talk about this in my lesson last week on sleep. You want to try and keep things as consistent as possible schedule wise. I don't mean to the minute. You don't have to be crazy perfectionist about it, but just within the range, right? So maybe you shoot to fall asleep between 9:30 and 10:30 in the evening so that you can wake up 7 to 8 hours later. And so being a little bit more disciplined around that time. Sometimes I have to set an alarm to remind me, especially when it's very busy and I can get kind of lost in all the things that I have to do. I will set an alarm on my phone to go off that's like, hey, you need to be in bed an hour from now. So I can wrap things up and pivot to make sure that I get enough sleep. It's one of those things that is very easy to just kind of like slip out of your fingers, through your fingers, and it makes a big impact on how we feel. So this is like one of the most overriding factors of biofeedback that you want to pay attention to. Sometimes when we talk about sleep, people will mention like fitness watches and stuff like that. I can do a lesson on them if people want to hear more about them. I personally don't wear one. I'm not a huge fan of them, but again, that's personal preference. I have clients that like wearing them. I have coaching friends that like wearing them. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just personally don't like them. They can help you track your sleep without having to do anything. So if you're like me and you don't like wearing them, you just have to be a little bit more disciplined about paying attention to the clock and when you wake up, when you fall asleep. So that is sleep. The second biofeedback factor that we are going to talk about today is hunger. So hunger, satiation, and satiety. Hunger, we know what hunger is, right? There's varying levels of hunger and how you experience them both physically and psychologically. Some symptoms of hunger might be you start to have a hard time focusing. Like you notice a difference in your focus, you notice a difference in your energy levels. You might notice that your stomach feels a little bit more empty or lighter. Those are good, like preliminary hunger signs. And then they will increase over time, right? They don't just like pop up out of nowhere. Then you might hear some gurgling. You might feel some cramping. You might feel lightheaded. You might feel shaky. Those are more aggressive signs of hunger. Satiation is fullness in the moment. Okay, so if I were to sit down and eat my breakfast right now, it would be basically like the gauge of hunger coming back up, right? And my fullness is increasing. So it is while you're eating the meal, and then satiety is like after you're eating the meal or overall fullness. So I generally ask my one-on-one clients what I'll have them rate their satiety on a 1 to 10 scale. And I tell them like within maybe like an hour or two of finishing their last meal for the day, where would you rate yourself on that scale? You want to come in about a 7. A 7 is like the perfect amount of fullness. You aren't thinking about food after. You aren't uncomfortable. You are just satisfied, like the perfect level of satisfaction. An 8 would be you're a little bit uncomfortable, like you pushed the fullness factor a little bit too far, you ate a little bit too much. So a 7 is perfect. A 6 would be like you want to go back to the kitchen and have more. You want to like pick off the plate, that sort of a thing. And there can be psychological factors that can influence that, but we're talking physical. So those are some examples of what hunger, satiation, and satiety look like. So we talked about physical and psychological symptoms of those factors, and how to rate them. You also want to focus on how consistent they are, and like, are they predictable or not? Or are they like just very sporadic and unpredictable? If you are eating consistently and if you are eating adequate calories, balanced over time, these hunger, satiation, and satiety signals should be very, very predictable. Like my husband the other day was commenting, he was like, you have like this internal clock, like you know exactly when you need to eat and how much you need to eat, and you're like my fitness pal in your brain. And he's not joking because I have put in so much work. I mean, I do this for a living, but I have put so much work in identifying these physical and psychological symptoms, and getting familiar with quantities and how they make me feel, and different food choices and how they make me feel, that know, I know when I need to eat, and I know how much I need to eat, and I know when to stop when I am eating in order to achieve that like 7 or so. It's not always perfect, and I tell my clients this all the time. You don't find it alarming if you get to a 6 and that's where you end your meal, or you get to an 8 and that's where you end your meal. There's going to be variance like everything else that we do. And even myself, like even though I am very well acquainted with this, I still have moments where sometimes I will reach an 8 and I'm like, oh, that was too much. I went a little bit too, I had too much. Um, and by too much, again, that is relative. So it doesn't tell you anything about my overall caloric intake for the day. It might be there was too much volume in the meal. So those are some factors that you can kind of play around with as well to make sure that you hit that 7 instead of like a 5 or a 9. So you also want to pay attention to when these symptoms peak during the day. So I talk to my one-on-one clients a lot about this, especially when we are finding our initial maintenance intake, or when we are returning to maintenance after a reverse, after a caloric deficit. And we're shooting for like a long-term maintenance phase where they focus on training. We want to reach adequate levels of satiety. We want to hit that 7 on average. And I really don't care if they need to gain a little bit of weight in order to do that. If they are planning on being on maintenance for 6, 7, 8, 9 plus extended months, or if they are finding their maintenance so that they can kind of graduate from working with me, I want to make sure that they are at the perfect level of satiety. So you can pay attention to when those hunger signals peak. If you're incredibly hungry in the morning, like mid-morning after your breakfast, and it's only like an hour after breakfast or 2 hours after breakfast, and your next meal, say you like work an office job and you have to wait until a specific time to have your lunch, it's just not going to last you long. So you spend the next 2 hours or 3 hours incredibly hungry and letting that hunger build up. Obviously not ideal. So we want to look back and add either more calories to breakfast, or make it higher volume, or balance it out more, maybe add more fat so it lasts longer. You want to look at the specific meal and food choices and adjust them to extend how long that fullness factor lasts. You can also play around with meal timing. So if you have a more flexible schedule and you are able to eat whenever you want to eat, then maybe I would suggest, hey, if you're happy with your breakfast and you like how it makes you feel, that fullness factor that you achieve after eating it, maybe you bring a small snack to have in between breakfast and lunch to extend that fullness level. So for example, if I were to eat breakfast and I at the end of it achieve a satiety level of a 7, over the next few hours it will steadily decline, right? So it might go down to like a 4 before lunch. So a 4 on that 1 to 10 scale would mean I am experiencing hunger signals now. And so then I would eat lunch, and then maybe it gradually builds from a 4 to a 5, a 6, and then maybe a 7. And then it will last me there, and then it gradually decreases as my body processes that food and uses it, and I burn through the fuel. So that's just an example of how hunger and satiation and satiety and fullness, how those all work. These are all things that you really want to pay attention to when you are looking to optimize your training and how you feel. Because if you are walking around with high levels of hunger or low levels of hunger, I guess, on the scale, because you would be closer to that 1, 2, 3, and 4 range on the 1 to 10 scale, you're not going to perform well. You don't have the energy to be doing what you want to be doing. So this is a way to gauge how your body's feeling and what it's ready to do. So that's just an example of a biofeedback factor that you can use, like your dashboard in the car, to kind of gauge what you need to give your body in order for it to feel its best. So factor number 3 is recovery. So you want to just be able to describe how you feel after your training session, immediately after the training session, but also like after in the day and just throughout the week. So you want to think about like excess soreness. Are you so sore that you are having a hard time walking downstairs, that you are waking up at night uncomfortable? Are you so sore that you have to modify your training sessions the next few days because you cannot perform them because you're so sore? Are you achy? This is one that I experience. Like, I just feel like my body aches if I push things too hard and I'm not recovering properly. You can also experience just like this feeling of heaviness. This can also happen if you're new to training and you're not used to pushing yourself at your maximal capacity because you're still learning. The heaviness that I'm describing is similar to when you don't get enough sleep. You might have experienced this. Like, you just feel like you weigh like 100 pounds more than what you actually do. So you want to think about specific movement patterns. This is a good way to identify maybe what you're pushing too hard or going overboard on, and what you can kind of reel back on so that you are in a more optimal recovery position. So maybe like knee dominant movements are what you tend to go ham on, and you need to kind of pull back a little bit. Or maybe you're just more susceptible to levels of soreness. So an example of that would be maybe like in an EMOM. High volume work with very little rest is one that gets a lot of people. So that's something that like you could just make a mental note and be like, hey, if we are doing an EMOM, I'm going to focus on keeping them light, keeping good form, and really just pushing the intensity factor. I am not going to worry about adding weight or large amounts of weight just to say, hey, I did the EMOM at this weight. I'm more focused on that recovery factor so that I can push the rest of my training sessions throughout the week, and so that I am in that optimal range of recovery. It's going to look different for absolutely everyone because external stressors will also impact this. I'm going through this right now. I'm in a very stressful time right now, a season, and I cannot handle huge amounts of volume in my training. I just can't because of the amount of stress that I am experiencing. So you want to look at the whole picture and then just kind of like make sure that you can stay in that box where you are recovering and you feel good. You also want to pay attention to your mood and just like, I call it drive. It's almost like sex drive, right? Like, but drive for training. We want to make sure that you're like excited for training, give or take. There's going to be days where you're not as excited as normal, or you maybe you're just like a little bit tired or just not feeling it. But you want to look out for being like dreading training is a good way to put it, where you're like, I absolutely do not want to do this, and I would do anything to not do it. That is a sign where you just aren't recovering. You are doing too much and you need to pull back. So that's recovery as the biofeedback factor. The fourth one is going to be energy. So this one's a lot easier to gauge. You want to describe your overall energy levels on a daily basis on a scale of 1 to 10. I ask my one-on-one clients to do this. A 1 would be you can't get out of bed. You're like falling asleep on the couch. You just can't function as a human. And a 10 would be you are absolutely up for anything. So, again, there's other external factors that influence this. Stress is a big one. If you are dealing with like anxiety or depression, that can also impact those descriptions. Maybe you feel like you are like disassociating a lot, or you're like paralyzed. Those are more symptoms of depression. You should reach out to a mental health professional. But these are more energy based. And you also want to pay attention to the consistency and variance in your energy levels. So, do you notice any patterns in these? Are you like, one of the more common ones that I see are people will be like super gung ho at the beginning of the week. They do everything in their training, they hit their nutrition perfectly. It's like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then come Thursday, they just crash and burn. Like, they just go all out, and then Thursday, Friday, and then even into the weekend, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, like I just have no energy. I don't feel like doing anything at the gym. I'm like crashing and burning mid-session, those sorts of things. That might mean that you have to look prior to the sessions that you did Monday through Wednesday and pull back a little bit, because you are pushing that recovery threshold a little too far. And now you're singing, I call it the boomerang effect. Like you go and do something, and then it kind of comes back and bites you in the face because you did too much. You want to try and avoid that. It's a weird concept, right? Because a lot of the times, like on social media, you'll be like, oh, you should push your training sessions incredibly hard. You should, maximize each set. But the whole picture is more important than any of that. So if you are doing that and it is then negatively impacting future days in your week, then it's not working for you. Like, you have to pull back in order to be able to sustain the week and your effort throughout the week. So the next biofeedback factor is going to be digestion. This is one that I see we've been getting a lot of questions about in the group recently. So you want to shoot on average for at least one daily bowel movement. It's solid, it's not too firm, not too soft. You're like, why are you talking about poop right now? Because it can really tell you if there are some things that you need to like adjust in order to hit that more optimal box of recovery. So if it is too loose, like you have like chronic diarrhea, or it's too dense, like you are straining, or you can't go to the bathroom, infrequent, too frequent, it like, again, it might be a sign that something needs to be adjusted. It's very common for people with chronic restrictive backgrounds to eat excessive amounts of fiber. Like the daily recommendation is 12 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories, just off the top of my head. So for most people, it's about 25 to 35 grams of fiber. But if you come from a restrictive background and you're used to eating lots of fiber to kind of distort your fullness, so eating more calories or eating more food for lower amounts of calories, like lots of vegetables, for example, to fill your stomach on little calories, this can result in digestive distress, like diarrhea. Stress can also be a factor. I just answered a question like that in the group recently. It's a lot of the times, again, because of social media, people are like, oh, I must be allergic to dairy, or I must be have a sensitivity to gluten. I need to stop eating this food or that food. Before you eliminate anything from your diet, you really want to look at stress levels. I gave the TWK athlete an example because I have 3 kids at home, and dinner times are just chaotic. It's like a zoo, because a lot of the times my husband isn't home, or he's coming home like mid-dinner, and so they're very young kids too. So I'm like sitting down trying to make dinner. Everyone's like, I need this, I need that. Everyone's getting up, and it's just like stressful. So if I try and eat then, and I'm not mindful about how I'm eating, I can like swallow lots of air when I'm eating. I can cramp and just be like in this stressed out state when I'm eating, and it can impact my digestion after the fact. So you want to be like generally relaxed when you're eating, mindful, not swallowing huge amounts of air, and be present. Another really common one is people will eat while they're watching something, and so they're not mindful of how they're eating. So they're just like watching whatever and eating, and then that can impact digestion as well. Maybe you're not eating enough fiber. Maybe you're under that threshold, and so that's why you're experiencing kind of like sluggishness, and that can impact how you feel. It can impact the scale. Maybe you're not drinking enough water. That can also impact digestion. Not eating frequently enough. If you are one of those folks that you wake up and you're like, I'm just not hungry, so I'm not going to eat breakfast. Lunch comes and you're like, whatever, I'll just have this little thing, not important. And then come the afternoon and evening, you're eating much larger meals because you're hungry because you've been under eating during the day. That can impact your digestion as well because you're not eating consistently enough throughout the day to really like optimize your digestion so that it is regular. You can also experience food allergies or sensitivities, but again, you really need to work with a healthcare provider to figure this out. Because I can go into this at a later date in another lesson, but like restrictive eating patterns can influence how you are able to digest certain foods in the future because of digestive enzymes and how they are made in the body. So if you maybe followed a fad diet that was like, don't eat any dairy, like paleo, for instance, this was me. And so I didn't eat dairy for a very long time. And then I added dairy back in. My body just was not making enzymes that it needed at the amount that they needed to break it down. So it always appeared that I had some sort of dairy issue with dairy, but it wasn't that. Even after testing and stuff like that, it was just because of my restrictive background. So this can happen pretty frequently. Or people will like start to focus on nutrition habits because they are experiencing some symptom, and the choices themselves naturally improve whatever the symptom is. So sometimes it's like, oh, I have really bad outbreaks when I eat like wheat or something. Um, but instead, they're just like drinking more water and eating more vegetables and making all of these nutrition changes that positively impact their skin instead of a wheat allergy, which is like there are, when you have an allergy to wheat, it is extreme symptoms. Sometimes it is life threatening symptoms. So, those are like more severe things that you want to look at, factors that you want to look at, food allergies and sensitivities, and you do need a healthcare provider to help you rule those out. Start with the things that are in your control and your sphere, like stress, like fiber, like water, those sorts of things, and then you can kind of build up to the more specific things. So please don't just like take food out of your diet because you are experiencing a certain symptom like diarrhea. It might be, if you don't have an idea of how much fiber you eat, that's a good place to start. If you are really stressed out or drinking large amounts of caffeine, stuff like that, that can all negatively impact your digestion and create loose bowel movements. So just something to keep in mind. That's something that I see often as a coach. I mentioned stress. So again, you can gauge your stress on a 1 to 10 scale. And you want to think about all physical and psychological stressors. I'll just use myself as an example. Like I have an injury right now to my hip. My family's getting ready to move overseas. Christmas, holiday season, all of this is just kind of like I'm working on a course for my work. and publishing it. So it's just a lot right now. So if I were to go and like really push myself in my training, I wouldn't really be able to recover from it because of everything that is on my plate. So you want to look at the whole picture, okay? Even like traveling, it could be positive stress. It could be like, I just came back from a Hawaiian vacation. Cool, but it's still stressful because you just went and traveled and you were eating different foods and your system's like not regulated to its typical routine and food choices and stuff like that. So that would be considered stress. Maybe you get like promoted at work. That's still stress. Like it still impacts your body, even though it's a positive thing in your life. You can also work on gauging your training stress. So I know there's a lot of like hybrid athletes in the group where you use TWK as a supplement to support your sport. Maybe you are like a skier or I don't know, just list something, martial arts. So you want to look at your overall training stress, your sport type, the frequency of your training, volume that you are currently at, intensity, and then periodization. So a lot of the times, like more beginner and even intermediate athletes think that more is better and that they always should be like shooting for PRs all year long. We see this often this time of year as people are setting goals for 2022 and they're like, I want to hit this on the hip thrust, I want to hit this on the squat, I want to hit this on the press. And that's really cool. Like you should be doing that, but you also want to keep in mind that there should be variance throughout the year with what you focus on. And in doing so, like the volume and intensity of your training sessions is also going to fluctuate. So the way TWK is programmed is we kind of vary sets and reps and intensity and volume throughout the week, but you also it also comes down to you and your choices and how you apply it and approach your training sessions. So if you like I think in the new session today, I just look like really quickly. I think it's front squats for that first superset. So maybe if I am in a phase where I am focusing on massing or in maintenance, nutrition wise, and I am really focusing on the big compound lifts and I am really shooting for PRs, maybe I really push the weight that I go for. But if I am 5-6 months from now, maybe I focus on like tempo instead, very controlled. And I add like a 3-second tempo. So it's very much controlled. So that will decrease the amount of weight that I am lifting in each session, and it varies the type of stimulus that my body has to recover from. It also gives you a psychological break because you're not always pushing yourself to that maximal percentage that you can lift, because that takes a lot of drive and effort and energy and recovery. And so you want to make sure that you use it sparingly. I equate it to like school, right? So if you were to take a final every single week, you'd just be like completely burnt out, right? Like finals wouldn't mean what they actually mean, right? Where they're testing how you have absorbed information over a period of time. You want to use PRs sparingly and make sure that you are able to give your all and recover from them all and really just like make them count instead of constantly reaching like that. You just need to be close to failure. It doesn't need to be failure. And what that means in regards to load can mean different for tempo, right? Like there's other ways that you can work in that kind of like range of failure than just adding load to the bar. So that's what I mean by periodization and how it can kind of just mitigate stress over time. The same applies for nutrition periodization. You shouldn't be in a cut all year long. You should be in a cut minimum 1 to 2 times, depending on your background and what your focus is as an athlete and your nutrition history, all of these things. So most of my clients spend the majority of their year in maintenance or even in a caloric surplus. And then when it comes time, if they so choose to do a cut, they are ready for it. Like they are incredibly well fueled. Um, they haven't been flexing that like willpower muscle because they are eating plenty of food. Their satiety is high and they're ready for it, instead of doing multiple cut attempts throughout the year and just never really accomplishing what you want. So you want to make sure that you vary your approaches throughout the year to really optimize your effort when it comes time to do so. So going back to my example with the athlete that DM'd me and they were like, hey, I'm just like not progressing the way that I want to be progressing. I feel like other people are progressing faster than I am. I feel like my energy is low. I'm always hungry, but I'm in maintenance. What's going on? This is a multifaceted situation with a lot of factors. So energy wise, it could be lack of sleep. It could be poor sleep quality. It could be inconsistent sleep and bedtime routine. Could be overexertion, like just doing too much in their training or in their life or in both. It could be lack of calories. It could be stress. It could be depression and anxiety. So lots of potentials, and many times it's like more than one. Hunger. They said that they were hungry. So their current intake might not be their actual maintenance. So I call it baseline maintenance, so what you are naturally eating and maintaining your weight at, and then I call it projected maintenance. So this is like what you could potentially eat based on your activity factor and stuff like that. So they might need to reverse diet to that higher intake range. Maybe their weight isn't an appropriate weight for them. I see this often with female athletes who are really focused on staying lean throughout the year. And they're just like really hungry all the time. You're really hungry all the time because you are trying to maintain a weight that isn't appropriate for you or sustainable. So you might need to, an easy way to do that is just to reverse a little bit to a higher um, weight range. And I suggest just doing it at 3 pound increments at a time. So if I were 135 pounds and I was like, yeah, I'm like never full at the end of the day, and I can't sustain this, then I can open that window up to like, if I were maintaining at 134 to 137, maybe I open it up to 137 to 140. And so I gain a little bit of weight and then I see how my satiety is then. That might be the situation. They might not be eating balanced enough. So too little protein or too little fat, too little carbohydrates. They might be eating too many processed foods, which aren't very high in fiber or very filling. So pretty low volume. So it's just not keeping them full. Maybe they're not getting too little sleep and it's affecting hormones like leptin and ghrelin. Or maybe they're just stressed. Another potential issue is like if they're not progressing in training, they might only be tracking like one or two metrics. So they're like, my max squat was whatever, like 180 pounds, and I'm still at 180 pounds. Okay, but look at the whole picture. Like, what else have you improved at? Are you squatting better? Is your form better? Are you able to handle more volume in the squat? Are you progressing in other movement patterns? Are you progressing in other squat variations? That sort of a thing. Maybe they are just getting inadequate calories, inadequate recovery, so they're doing too much and they're not able to recover from it. Maybe they're not doing enough volume based off of their history in order to improve in the way that they want to improve. This is a more specific factor, and you definitely want to make sure that you're working with the other coaches to make sure that you're not doing too much volume. You don't want to be like, I'm not improving in the squat, so I'm going to add more squats, because if you add more, it might tip that recovery equation in the wrong direction and not get you to where you want to go. So if you add something, you want to kind of take something away as well. Or maybe you're just struggling with comparison, comparing yourself to other people. Everyone's progress is going to look different depending on their situation, and that is a common trap as well. So Mandy asks, how can we know if we are at a true maintenance? So I have a lesson on maintenance that you want to check out. If you search the hashtag nutrition with Morgan, it'll pull it up. Sorry, that's my hot water heater. um, but I just like a quick recap on how you can kind of figure that out is you want to use a TDEE calculation. There's calculators online that you can use. Again, they're just estimates, and see where you're at right now, where you're maintaining right now compared to what those are saying. Even those can be wrong. Like generally speaking, they're pretty wrong for me. So if you feel like your satiety is low and your hunger is really high and you are eating balanced and you're getting a good amount of fiber, you're hydrated, those sorts of things, then you could just start adding some calories every other week, like 50 calories, 75 calories every other week, to try and reverse to that maintenance range that the TDE calculator gave you. Even if it's low, even if it says that you are maintaining at the right amount and you are experiencing those things, I still suggest adding a little bit more, and not worrying about the scale and what it says, because if your satiety is that low and you are sleeping well and all this, eating balanced, getting enough fiber, then you likely just need more food. There's a bunch of different factors that can result in that scenario. Like for me, the TDE calculator or calculation was so far off when I came from a kind of like restricted, highly stressed out background from CrossFit. It was like paleo, always doing metcons like nonstop, always working at that like 110% intensity. I was massing on 5,000 calories, and that is pretty common for people with a very stressed out background like I had. So if I were to just follow the TDEE calculator, it would have been really bad. Now I would gain a ton of weight if I eat 5,000 calories because my system has regulated, so it's fluctuating as well. So hopefully that answers your question, but you should definitely look at the maintenance lesson that I did. So as you can see, it's not as simple as, oh, you're not progressing, you're always hungry, you don't have enough energy, just do this. You have to be looking at your biofeedback in order to kind of see what your body's telling you and kind of reverse track from there. So, like I listed out each symptom and then the potential reasons why that person might be experiencing those symptoms, then that person can be like, okay, well, I am not very stressed out. I'm actually like in a really good place. I am not overexerting in my training. I don't have any signs of overexertion. It sounds like this person might just need to increase the amount of calories that they are eating. So this is like kind of a way to just like backtrack. This way you can see like your dashboard of your car and you can rule certain things out. Maybe they're sleeping 7 hours, they can add a little bit more sleep to see if that positively impacts how they are doing. And even if they were to do everything that I suggested, they added more calories, they added more sleep, they made things more balanced, maybe it comes down to mindset where they are just comparing themselves to other people, and you never know someone's reality or what they're actually showing or their background or anything like that. So that's why I suggest not comparing yourself, because you filter out all of your own progress in doing so. Okay, so thank you. I will rewatch it. You've range around 2000, but yeah. So if are you gaining weight right now? If you are at 2000 calories and you are maintaining at 2000 calories and you are still hungry, you still feel like you have pretty low energy, that sort of a thing, then you just might need more. The thing with calculators online specifically is that they don't know enough about you to give you a realistic number. And even for me, like I do this for a living, I calculate people's needs. Um, it's still a estimate. I still walk people through the trial and error process in order to determine what their true maintenance range is. So I can calculate something, and then based on that person's biofeedback, I could be like, yeah, we still need to push it. We still need to increase calories, and they will maintain their weight on more calories, even with me calculating it specifically to their needs and not just like 2 to 3 factors that a calculator does. So hopefully that answers your question. It's just that you cannot find your true maintenance intake without the trial and error process. There's no way that a calculator would be able to tell you exactly what you need. And even then, with maintenance, there's a range to maintenance. So a lot of the times people will get fixated on, oh, it says I need 135 grams of protein and 200 grams of carbs and whatever amount of fat, and there's a range, like it's about 10% for your total intake. So you might be able to maintain at 2,000 calories, but you could also generally maintain at 2,200. So I'm not losing or gaining, but would like to cut in the next few months. Yeah, so there's really, there's no way to tell unless you push it a little bit further. And you have to really read your biofeedback to know if you can increase calories more. Because just because you're maintaining doesn't mean that it's your true maintenance intake. So when I take people through the process, I'll generally take them like to the top end of their maintenance range, and they might gain weight for a week or two, and then we kind of pull it back so that we know, okay, that's your top end of your maintenance, and we'll stay within this range now. It's hard when you're doing it by yourself because you might question, like, just not feel confident and you don't want to gain weight. But like I said, it's trial and error, and nothing permanent will happen in a week or two. Like, it's not like that 1 or 2 pounds that you gain is going to stay forever for the rest of your life. Your system is adaptive, not fixed. So, yeah. So hopefully that helps. And this is the lesson on biofeedback. I think I pretty much covered everything. Like I say in the end of the lesson, like coaches are more than calculators or programmers. Like we really, like I'm a nutrition coach, so I help people read their biofeedback and apply it to nutrition. But Katie, Jess, and Haley do the same. Katie has amazing programming, as we all know, but like every single week she puts up the programming, and it's important that people ask questions and individualize it to their needs. So if it's like too much volume, or you need help pulling back on volume, or you're not progressing on the specific movement and all of your form checks are good, like there's something that needs to be adjusted. It doesn't need to be totally new programming. It's just like a little change. It might mean eating a little bit more calories, or swapping out one program movement for another, for instance. These little changes can result in big change down the line. So I'm going to leave it at that unless someone else has any other questions. If you're watching this after the live, please feel free to ask questions. I see it, it'll pull my name up and notify me, and I'll answer them after the fact. If you have any requests for topics, I am more than happy to answer them and do a lesson on it, because I'm here to serve you and just clarify nutrition stuff in general, because it's a pretty difficult subject to navigate online. There's a lot of BS out there. So if you have any questions, just let me know. You can always private message me on Instagram, or just post in the group and comment, and I'll be happy to answer them. All right, y'all. I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday, and I will see you next week.